fun little gathering today.
We are going to finish what we started last week. You may recall we did some quilted trivets.
If you don't recall, you can watch it.
Right, it's there. But because we've made them circles, we need to bind them. And we bind curves with a bias binding.
Yes.
So we wanted to show you how that is done.
Okay, so the biggest thing is cutting your bias binding. I think that iron's on. Just press
Mom said
yourself
it's
on.
hot.
Okay, when I cut the fabric to make these, you'll remember I only cut like 10-inch, 11-inch squares. But, so it really doesn't take that much fabric. But when I cut the binding fabric, I cut a whole half of a yard.
Right.
And that's more fabric than we need. But it's the only way to do bias binding without wanting to dye.
Right, you really don't want to do a bunch of like 10-inch strips.
So go ahead and make extra. We're going to bind all 4 of these and probably still have some more for another project.
Right, so it's going to be great.
So you need more fabric for bias binding. So you know how sometimes you can buy a quarter of a yard to get your small project bound? This one, get your whole half the yard. It's just
press right here too.
Yeah, the big fat.
You may have seen, so I grew up, we were shown the continuous bias binding method, and I think partly because of that, I was always scared of binding.
Yes.
Bias binding, because it's like, oh my gosh, all that drawing and cutting with scissors.
And I always thought the binding had to be done on the bias.
Right.
It does not.
Nope.
But today, because we're doing circles,
it has to be. And sometimes you want it on the bias. You know, I found some great stripes that I love, like Tula stripes. Love her stripes.
But you want
it's
sometimes
really
you want
not
it at an angle.
It's better at an angle. So this is as complicated as it gets. You can make a square. You can do all that, or with regular everyday yardage.
Open it up.
Nothing special. We open it up. We take our ruler here with this 45-degree angle line. That's our friend. We line that up with the selvage. The reason I'm using the selvage and not some other spot on here is because I know the selvage is straight.
Yes, because
that's the weave.
Yeah.
So I've got it lined up there, and I'm just going to cut it. That's all.
Cut.
This is seriously as complicated as it gets. Now I can cut this down over here.
We can cut this into smaller strips if you need it. We don't, so if you're
I'm not gonna because
it's gonna go into my scratch stash bin.
And now that I have my 45-degree angle, here's a 2.5-inch strip. My ruler's not quite long enough. That's fine. Just move it along.
Yep.
The reason we need a bias binding is because, you know, Liz and I have talked about doing triangles
you cut strips
before.
I'm gonna show them this.
And that's because when we're working with the grain.
So with the fabric, stretches about like this. See, there's that little bit of stretch there.
A little bit of give, not much.
Length of fabric along the selvage doesn't stretch.
Like, not at all.
This edge right here, where this is cut on the bias, this triangle is really handy for this.
Right.
Woo! There's a lot of stretch in there.
Stretches a ton.
Which can be bad when you're trying to piece triangles.
Right. Which is why we don't
want
like
to complicated. But when we're trying to bind curves
and we want to go around
and
not
have
nice
a bunch
smooth
of without puckers, this is good.
It's our friend.
So that's a really good example. Length of fabric, no stretch. Width of fabric, some stretch.
Not much.
Cut on the bias, lots of stretch.
That's why if you ever see a pattern with instructions that says to cut the border length of fabric before you subcut other things, this is why. It's because it'll keep your border from stretching and getting wider.
And then you don't have wavy borders.
I was cutting a pattern yesterday, and it told me to cut a bunch of like 2-inch strips and then cut 12-inch sashing pieces. And I was like,
I cut a 12-inch strip and then I
cut a 12-inch strip, which actually used less fabric, so it was a better use of fabric. I cut a 12-inch strip and then subcut 2-inch pieces, because that way those little sashing pieces are going to have way less stretch to them, and it'll help my quilt stay more square.
Yep.
So it's always good to read through the whole pattern and find out what they want you to do with it.
And I do that all the time, especially with sashings, especially with a narrow sashing. I like to be able to have cut them length of fabric because
especially narrow strips.
they fabric kind of wants to stretch when you're working it through your pressing foot, and
because it doesn't feed evenly.
Yes.
I absolutely love that she's going to piece this with a sulky because we just haven't changed our thread. Anyway, so seriously, you just piece these together and lay your strips. If you're wondering, did I put these two strips together right? Put your finger here, open it up. If you have a nice continuous line, great. If all of a sudden you have a right angle, flip it. The fabric we're using here, fun as an extra challenge, is directional. So if you want to challenge yourself a little bit more with bias binding, you can always go with a directional fabric like this.
And have an absolute need to match it because we're anal.
We're like that.
Sorry.
We're fastidious.
That's a word for it.
It sounds so much nicer.
It does.
And it's also accurate.
See, that's upside down.
Yep.
Not that anybody will ever notice.
Well, and you're binding here because
a trivet.
Right.
I've got a weird edge here, so don't watch what I'm doing. I'm breaking all the rules.
Well, the thing is, you're not always going to be able to line it up exactly. Part of the reason I opened up this fabric, because I have been asked why you can't just do it on the fold, is because you're going to end up with some
Funny
V's
corners.
instead of straight lines.
Okay. This is enough to do
And then
this
you end up
trivet,
with
though.
more pieces. Right.
Okay.
So we have
Generally
enough binding.
speaking, I'm not going to suggest that you piece your batting with sulky thread because it adds a lot of matter.
Could I get a binding? Not a binding. Wool pressing mat, please.
It's right behind you.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know where she put it.
Threw it behind me.
Fair enough.
Yeah. This thread adds a lot of bulk, you guys. Don't piece with it, please.
No, it's not for piecing.
This is the first time I've tried to piece with it. It's fun. I mean, it works.
It works. But, you know, Liz and I like to say we use fine threads because thread adds mass
And
to the finished
I'm
product.
going to tell you this thread added some serious mass.
But we'll press it open so it won't be quite so bad. And we're not trying to do accurate piecing here.
Yeah, so at least it's, what's the word? It's binding, and so imperfections.
Right, so if we lose a 32nd of an inch, nobody will know.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Right. All right, so what we're going to be doing is a French binding, which means I fold it in half
And press
and
it.
press. You can also do a double fold bias binding here, in which case I would, after I've pressed it in half like this, I'd open it up and press in on each side. That works really nicely if you want to use like binding tape or glue and sew top and bottom at the same time.
But we'll do one at a time.
So we are hand finishers for binding.
Yeah.
We just are. So we're not going to do that. But it is a really nice way to do it, especially for something like this. And it would be cute on a trivet too, because then you could use like your decorative thread to sew the binding on.
I mean, I'm not hand finishing these. I'm
No,
going to machine finish this.
right. We're going to leave.
Generally, Jen and I are hand finishers.
We
which is
are
why
hand
do it this way.
finishers.
But on a trivet, I have my limits even. On a trivet, no.
No.
Although I will hand finish placemats.
Right.
I'm not sure how that makes sense, but I'm pretending like it does.
It actually doesn't. Like, not even a little bit.
I know. Oh, snip that little tail.
Our little dog ear.
Yes. Whatever you want to call it.
It's called a dog ear.
Okay, whatever. That little piece of fabric hanging out over
In
the
the
edge.
vernacular. The reason we want to trim off those little dog ears is because, again, we're adding bulk.
Bulk. Anytime we add bulk, we want to, well, we don't want to add more bulk than we need to add.
Especially where we're trying to make this binding curve.
Yeah, the more extra stuff there is, the harder it is to get that nice, smooth.
And this binding method is going to be great for a lot of different types of projects.
So this is more than enough for a trivet.
Plenty. I have a quilt at home that I'm binding for a customer, which we don't do a lot, but I do. But it's an older quilt with a scalloped edge. It's a double wedding ring.
Yeah.
And so to get that nice scalloped shape for the finished edge, you have to do a bias binding. And as far as trimming that goes, that's done with scissors by hand.
Yep.
I can't use a rotary cutter to square up that quilt. It doesn't work. I have to sit there with my scissors and trim it by hand.
Okay, I'm just putting a couple clips on here to show you guys
Binding clips are our friends.
what this is going to look like. So you'll see it's kind of getting poofy in there, and I'm kind of stretching.
You want to kind of
Not
stretch
a lot of stretch. I'm not pulling on it, you guys, but it does naturally stretch
and you
a little
want it
bit
to a little bit
out to the
because
curve.
this edge right here is going to come in on the other side. And so it needs to be bigger on the outside than it is on the inside.
Okay.
Which is why we're doing a bias binding.
Trying to get this. I need my my
Your
stiletto.
Right? You need my stiletto to get underneath that
Okay.
sucker.
I'm going to go ahead and do a narrow stitch on this because we have a crap ton of bulk.
I know you, it's hard to know if your foot's down or not.
When there's this much stuff underneath it,
You
yeah.
have to go nice and slow or it won't catch the stitches.
It's catching my stitches. Good. And this is going to be really cute machine finished on the other side.
It will be
Be
really
honest.
cute machine.
Don't go fast.
Go down.
If you guys remember last week, we changed to the bigger needle. And
Which
that
helped
made all the difference.
Immensely. When you're working with something big and bulky, that's why there are different needle sizes. If you're ever in the shop and you want to know all about needles,
We have
go
a
ask
free little
Serena
handout
nicely because we've got a great little booklet
from
from-
Schmetz.
Yep, from Schmetz that tells all about the different needles, the different sizes, what they mean.
What they're there for, what all those little bands on them. Why there's different colored bands for
Right.
different needles. They actually mean something.
They do. And you don't have to remember it all. That's why the little booklet's awesome. Because then you can save that space on the hard drive for
really-
other things.
Okay, you guys, I did a really narrow stitch, and I think it's going to end up being a really good thing.
I agree. Because part of the reason she did a narrower stitch is, again, we're dealing with mass here.
I've got 8 layers, or 4
We've
layers.
got 2
6
layers. Right. We have 2 layers of Insul Bright, and we have 2 layers of cotton batting, plus
2
cotton
layers
fabric,
of fabric.
top and bottom. And we need to get over all of it and wrap around. And where Liz wants to machine finish this, we definitely need
I need that overhang on the back.
the
I
flange
have
on the
to have
back.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what, Jen? So, I don't know if you guys can see this. My stitch here is really narrow. It's somewhere between 1/4 and 1/8.
Right.
It's really narrow.
But it's going to be great. I just want to flip this over because look,
See,
now we have that nice
it's this nice rounded edge,
rounded edge.
and actually I can stitch from the top or the bottom.
You
It
totally
didn't have
could.
to be quite as narrow as I made it,
But it looks nice. the
but
way
look
you
how
did
it like holds perfectly, you guys.
And
It's
then on
really
the
nice
back,
and big
these
on the
aren't
back.
puckers,
No, there's no puckering on the back.
which is awesome.
Anyway, Jen, join that.
You want me to join that?
Or measure it to join it. This is the measuring to join bias binding is not quite as simple.
It's not quite as simple as I always talk about my little magic trick,
Mhm.
and it's a little different this way.
Yeah.
It's still the same concept. Okay.
It's just slightly trickier.
It's just a little bit trickier. So what I'm going to be measuring is not the outside, it's the inside. So I'm going to hold that here. My ruler is 2.5 inches, which is the width of my binding. Usually I use my binding as a measuring tool, but today it will be my ruler because I'm going to find that easier. If you want a real video for how I do this, not when it's being super tricky,
We have them.
we have a few.
There's pins. You don't want to pin that.
I want to, like, yeah.
I just did a binding video, you guys. I gotta finish editing it. Or sending it to Aiden to edit.
That's how we edit things.
I did it on Monday. It's still not edited because I find that intimidating and he just does it well. So
Give
Thanks.
myself a target or give Liz a target.
yes, it really helps to have, if you can't see where your corners are, I did this in my video on Monday. I feel like I just did this.
Yeah, right.
Probably
Fold
because
it,
I just did.
make a target. Well, it's because we do it the same way all the time because guess what? It works.
Well, I talked through the instructions on it the other day.
Ah.
That's why I'm like, I just talked about all
You
this.
just said these words.
I know, but it's because this is not going to be perfect, but that's okay.
Binding.
I actually didn't leave quite a big enough opening, so that's my bad.
But it's hard to leave a big opening on a
I
trivet.
say, it's hard to leave a big opening on a circle and then get your measurement accurate, so we just kind of fudge.
Right?
This is kind of fun, piecing with sulky.
I know, I'm like, I kind of want to sew more with sulky thread.
Not so much on the piecing part, you guys. I don't know that I need to piece with sulky ever again, but I kind of like the stitching. This is fun.
Right? I'm excited to see the decorative top stitch.
Yes, me too.
To sew the
finish
binding
this
down.
guy.
I am gonna, a lot of times I just kind of finger press that open.
With that huge thread.
But I'm not gonna this time. I'm gonna
Oh.
do it for realsies. Okay, and so now what we'll do is we'll come around here.
Binding clips are going to be helpful because if there is any extra bulk or any extra stretching we need to
Right,
do,
if I didn't do this perfectly,
which we probably didn't.
this is how we fix it. For people who think we always do our work perfectly,
We're really good at fudging things.
the trick to anything, and I tell people this all the time in like my piecing classes, is knowing when to pull out a seam and when you can fudge it.
Mhm.
You know, when can I make adjustments to make this work? Because we're working with an organic product that's going to shift, and we're working with humans who make errors. And so it's a matter of knowing when it's a problem and it needs to come out, and when you can adjust
Fudge.
a little bit and make it work. In this case, it's pretty good.
Did my bobbin run out?
It might have. We did get a lot of thread in that bobbin because, you know, it's
Go
12 weight.
figure, you guys. We're almost done even. No?
That's how life
There's
goes.
bobbin thread.
I don't know. Alright, try again.
Hold please.
Oh, please.
That's stitched.
Alright,
Okay. Uno momento.
we'll give it a go.
I have no idea what the heck just happened.
Not a clue. Alright, I'm gonna clean up after us.
What?
I know, it's weird.
You talk like I make a mess.
Sewing does make a mess.
That is probably true.
Come on, cooking. Is it sewing? Sewing.
It is. Yay! Wonder clips are my favorite, you guys.
Oh
They're
my
like
gosh,
a
best
friend.
Product ever. And I use them for more than binding.
I'll use them for all sorts of crap.
I have like 5 bags of them.
I know. I'm like,
Well, because I have
how
like
many is too many Wonder clips? I don't know.
Well, like I had to buy.
Plus, I have different color schemes of them. They cannot get intermixed.
Right, the pink ones can't get mixed with multicolor ones.
My pink ones got mixed with my red ones.
But now it's like a Valentine's mix.
Yes.
But to add the light pink to my multicolored one, because with my multicolor set there's the same number,
Yes.
so I can use them sequentially.
And I do that because I'm weird.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys. So I flipped my binding around.
And now we're going to use binding clips
I'm
again
going to use binding clips again.
to hold it in place.
Just to, you know, make it smooth and pretty. And then we'll just top stitch this sucker.
Right?
Then we'll have a cute little trivet. Or very thick hot pad, depending on how you choose to use it. We're gonna have Mom finish the rest of these in this pile because we cut enough for 4,
And clear the binding.
and clearly we have enough binding. So we like to leave Mom tasks. Sorry, thanks, Mom.
But I decided, wouldn't it be great to take them to our retreat with us?
Yes.
Because we do home cooked meals at our retreat.
So we should have
always
homemade
need hot
trivets.
pads.
Because
Right.
we are those people.
If the shop's gonna have hot pads and trivets, they might as well
Okay,
have been made by us.
So it's all clipped in on the circle. We're gonna sew just in from the edge. So it is gonna show up down here, but I think it'll
Right.
still be cute.
And it's really gonna be a question of what you prefer. If I was the one doing this,
A lot of people will stitch it from this side,
I would be stitching in the ditch right up here.
and then they're okay with having a bigger flange on the back.
And
The big flange on the back makes me go bananas.
Liz likes to control the flange, so she doesn't care how it shows up on the other side. So the thing is, I've had people tell me
This
I do
is-
it wrong.
This
And then
is a
people tell
total
me,
personal preference thing about what what is it that you are picky about? Jen is picky about where the stitching shows up on this side. I am picky about where the stitching shows up on this side. So,
It's up to you.
it's up to you which one bugs you.
There is not
Okay.
a right answer.
I don't like the extra flange flipping like that. It drives me batty. And so I stitch from the other side.
Right.
Jen, on the other hand, wants it perfectly in the ditch on this side.
Right.
Either one is acceptable.
Right.
That's my point. Whatever.
I
floats your
had
boat.
somebody in my binding class tell me I was doing it wrong.
You're like, why are you taking a class from me?
Right. And I was like, you can do it that way. That's fine. But this is how I do it because this is what matters to me.
Yes, it's really, and that's the thing with a lot of stuff in quilting and everything else, you guys. What matters to you?
Right.
Make a point of making it nice the way you're gonna want it, okay?
Right.
But it's why, like, Jen and I are typically hand finishers because we just
Well, and
prefer that look, and so that's what we do.
so that's how we spend our time. Other people don't care.
It doesn't make a difference to them, and so,
They machine finish.
which is great, I think.
Right? Honestly, anybody that has less neuroses than me is doing great.
Yep. Seriously, you're probably better off in general because you're less neurotic than I am.
Right.
Can't go too fast, can't go. I'm a speedy. Oh, I broke my thread. Dang it.
That's part of why you can't go too fast.
Remember how I just said we haven't had any thread breaks since we. Oh, got like jammed in there.
Just pull it all the way out. Let go. Let go. Start over.
Yeah.
Rule number 1, when you thread breaks all the way, just start over. Don't try and pick up threading your machine halfway through. Because, I don't know why, they don't like it. Then you're probably going to get some bunching and it's going to drive you crazy and you're going to say what's wrong and then you're going to have to rethread it all anyway.
That was so close. See, it's good on the other side. It's like a consistent width inside the
Right? Which works great.
thing.
It's a nice little decorative stitch. See, Mom, I'm being nice. I'm cutting the rest of the binding for you.
Okay. Apologize for the delay in.
You know, I just realized I don't have to move my ruler. I'll put my little 2.5-inch ruler up here.
That's handy. So, you guys, that's a trick we actually use all the time.
All the time. Stacking rulers?
Yeah.
All the time.
Like, you need a 12.5-inch strip and you don't have a 12.5-inch ruler, guess what? Your 6.5 and your 8.5 together
Will work just
will
fine.
work great. And you can keep all your lines just right.
Well, and we do it all the time at the shop because, like, cutting 45-inch wide. I mean, the Minky is 90 inches wide, but folded it's 45.
Yeah, and guess what? I don't own a 45-inch ruler.
Nope. I mean, we bought yardsticks because we're like,
But
ooh,
those
this
are
is-
still only 36 inches.
right.
So I pair up my yardstick with my 24-inch
Right.
ruler across the big line and go from there. Yeah, this is fun. It's like so stuck under the presser foot.
That and threading the needle.
There's just so much bulk here. But it's super adorable.
You'd probably make it with one layer of pencil bright.
You probably could,
And it would
but
probably make it a lot easier.
I kind of
But
like
Liz
it too.
was like, go big or go home. So,
I was raised by my mother, who, by the way, is the same way. So that's the way I was taught. If you're gonna do it, let's just do it.
for realsies.
So if that bothers you, you can blame my parents. I
Right.
do. I only say that because my mom's watching.
Actually, you know what's really funny? Somebody sent me a picture today because I said something like, listen, you people who have to post pictures of weird spiders you find at your house, like, we can't be friends because I don't want to see that. So she sent me this picture of some big Brazilian spider guarding all of its, like, thousands of babies
Yeah.
under a bed.
Oh, I saw that.
And I was like, nope. I'm saying that because we had to tell our mother the other day that we all have this horrible fear of spiders, and it's her fault.
It's all her fault.
She didn't know it was her fault.
She's like, I didn't know I ruined you. We're like, yeah, well, we're all afraid of spiders. It's not really her fault. It's a movie's fault. We just
Right.
blame her because she let us watch said movie at 8 years old.
Right. That's okay.
We're still alive.
okay.
We're just afraid of spiders. Okay. Ooh, my tension got weird on the back.
Yeah.
That explains why it was being weird.
Yeah.
Okay, my tension got funny on the back, but the stitching's right in here.
It
I
looks
will
nice
probably-
right there. We're gonna
I
pull
will
it out and redo
probably pull this out and redo it, but that was something got hung up in my bobbin, it looks like.
it. But on the front,
On the front, it's beautiful. Looks just like this, nice and,
heavy
I mean, it
duty,
could still be used as a
hot
grabby hot pad, but nice and
sturdy.
sturdy. It'll work well as a trivet or a hot pad, and they're fun to make, and you can make them for all your seasons. It can be part of your holiday decor,
Neighbor gifts.
neighbor gifts.
Friend
Neighbor
gifts.
gifts are good. Anyway, but that's it. That's bias binding, you guys. It is that easy.
It is that easy, and look at the nice,
Perfectly,
clean
no
circle we got.
puckers.
No folds, no puckers, none of it. And that's because we did it on the bias.
Now, don't stretch. Just let it naturally work the curve.
It's gonna be great.
It works
You
well.
can do it. I promise. It's not scary.
Yep. Doesn't have to be scary.
All right.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.